Stephanie Haynes. I am the director of Philly Family Pride. I use she, her pronouns. And I'm really excited today to have Alexander and Kat joining us to talk to us about building resilience in our kids. So as the theme of the conference is lessons in resilience, we want to not only learn how to be resilient ourselves, but help our kids build their resilience. So really looking forward to this session. So I'm going to turn it over to you all, and I'm going to mute. Oh, and I should say I will be letting people in, so don't worry about the waiting room.
That's fine. That's okay. Great. Awesome. So thank you, Stephanie. I'm Alexander Stefanini, and I'm going to be co-presenting with Kat. So I use he, him pronouns, and Kat uses they, them pronouns. We both work for Arrive Therapy. I'm the owner of Arrive Therapy, and we both have a lot of years of experience as LPCs working with kids and families. So that's sort of like what our focus is. I have two kids myself. I have an almost 10-year-old and a 6-month-old, so kind of like a wide range there. So anyway, so we're excited to be able to talk about resilience today, not only from our like clinical experience and our training, but also some personal experience. Right, so we'll get started here. Okay, this is a little bit about what we're going to go through. What does resilience look like? What are some unique stressors? What builds resilience? We want to give you some like really specific tools. There's only so much we can cover in this short period of time, but we want to give you a couple specific tools. A couple of those are special time, stay listening, and then like a little conclusion. So just a heads up, we are going to ask you some questions. The more you can participate, the more you'll get out of it. So we want to kind of ask you to jump in when we ask questions. There will be hopefully, if we have time, there'll be a Q&A section at the end. We may run out of time for that. Okay, so we're going to start with a little video that's very short, just kind of gives like a real sense of what we mean by resilience.
I want you to do everything that you can to knock your toy down. Who is the strongest in class? Jerron, come on up, please. I'm going to give Jerron a prop, and he's going to try to knock it off the table. Ready, Jerron? Okay, children, who can tell me what it means to have resilience? Yes, Paige?
Resilience means if you make the toy fall down, it'll come back up very, very fast.
Very nice.
All right, I love that little video. It's great. Really kind of like has the essence of what we want to communicate. Obviously, there's a lot of nuance to that. All right, so resilience really is a capacity to recuperate and to bounce back mentally and physically when you face challenges and possibly negative events in life. Really, that's like the most simple definition. It's just the ability to bounce back. So if you just remember that video, it's like, you know, life might push you down or knock you over and then like kind of coming on back. So there's a saying, build a child and you won't have to repair an adult, right? So resilience is also about building a child's inner strength, building their capacity to handle everything that life's going to throw at them. And so I like that as well, just kind of remembering that. So why building resiliency is essential. Life is going to throw challenges at all of us, both in childhood and an adult. So it's really like a quality. It's resilience is, think of it as like something that you can build and possess. Like if you're an artist, right? The more you practice, the more you have skills. That's like a quality about you. So think of it in that way, to be able to overcome hardship now and in the future. It's more than about getting through obstacles. It's really about building your kids' confidence and their ability to work through life's challenges. So that's where like really giving them the skills and also working on their emotional capacity. Those two things are really important, because you can't prepare your kid for every single thing that's going to happen in life. And you also can't buffer them from everything, but you can sort of begin to build those tools and build their muscles. So building resilience boosts mental and physical well-being. It really improves everything from physical health over a lifetime, educational relationships in the future, just every part of their life is improved. And even like the length of their life is improved by resilience, having that ability to kind of like take on challenges and bounce back. All right, Kat.
So I kind of, so one of the other things that like with building resilience, and we run into these hardships and these different things that kind of come into our life that they're kind of unexpected life challenges. And so kind of like Alex was saying, boosting overall well-being. So I wanted to put up the poll real quick for the age groups. Can we put that up real quick?
Right.
I wanted to put that one, and then I'm going to put the second one. First, I'm going to give a second for this poll.
Sorry, I'm eating, so I had my video off, but I'm here.
Quick question. If we're waiting to adopt or foster, should we also do the age group question too, or leave that blank if we know?
I mean, if you know what age group you're going to adopt, then I think that's helpful.
Awesome. Will do. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, Kat.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay. So what I want you to think about in even your kids and yourself is where you see these attributes of resiliency. So when you're looking at this list, this slide is, we can see these are many different attributes. We don't all represent and show all of them all of the time. And some people, we see resiliency a little bit more with certain attributes. So I kind of wanted to give you some ideas. And I also want you to think about ways you see your children as resilient and ways you see yourself as resilient. And for instance, like sometimes there's cultural norms that might change things, or the way someone displays resiliency. So go ahead and go to the next slide for me.
So I want to go through some of these. I want to kind of talk with you about what it looks like in your kid when you're looking at your child and you're saying like, is my child resilient? You're looking for some of these things. You're looking for like them to really be connected to people, connected to hobbies, to be able to sort of like problem solve, to be able to be assertive, to set their own boundaries and limitations, to sort of be like patient with other people, to take some responsibility for things. So this can look like all different things in each kid, but these are some like being able to be independent, take on challenges, have sort of an overall positive outlook for life, even if they're like realistic about some challenges that they're having. Let's see. Okay. So here's a parent question. We'd like to ask you guys, what does resilience look like in your child? And what is the situation that comes to mind when you felt your child was resilient? So I'd like to open this up. I know there's only a few of you all, but I'd like to sort of hear some things that you've experienced with your kids.
My baby is 17 months old. I feel like he gets a lot of good genes from his other mom, who is the biological and gestational parent. She's very patient, and I see a lot of patience in him in general. and I see a lot of easygoingness and going with the flow. And I'm a stay-at-home mom, luckily, right now, and so we have a really good routine, but there's just a lot of flexibility when we switch things up. For example, we went to a bonfire last night with a new queer community here in Delaware, and he met a whole bunch of different kids, like he'd never seen a bonfire before, and he just adapted very well. We took his favorite little truck, and he was giving his truck to other kids. And, you know, I know he's not at the age where he's like playing with kids, but he just kind of handled himself really well. We were so proud. He was very calm and cool the whole time. There was an older toddler who did not appreciate my baby trying to play with one of his toys and like pushed him to the ground. And he, you know, he was like, oh, okay. And I just like redirected my son away, and he just was fine, you know, like I feel like I'm seeing little signs already.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, it's really what you're seeing is that sort of like flexibility and patience and like curiosity about life. And it sounds like there's a lot of stability in his life, but also, I mean, kids do come in with different, you know, different genetics and different personalities. And so there are some kids that are much more easily dysregulated and have a more difficulty time with new things, or maybe much more sensitive. But even with that kind of kid, like resilience is a quality that can be built in them. And sometimes it takes a little bit more work, but I think you're definitely right that all those things, and even just being able to sort of go like, oh, someone got upset, and not getting like really dysregulated himself by this other kid, that those are all really good signs of resiliency. So anyone else want to share anything?
This is my little peanut here. Can say hi?
Hello.
Hi. She is very kind and very empathetic, and she makes friends very easily. She's not great with things changing. She's not great with changing routine, but she is very outgoing with other kids. She's kind of shy with other adults, but she's very outgoing with other kids. She's very kind and very sweet. And she's always the kid that if another kid is sad, she's always the one going to comfort them.
That's lovely. That's so sweet. Right? What is your name?
Beatrix.
What is it?
Beatrix.
Beatrix. Well, hi, Beatrix. Thanks for coming to our talk.
Can I say hi? Being a little shy.
And what I was going to say is, like, you know, you're a kid, like sort of like Kat was saying, doesn't have to have all the different things that we might think of as like resilient, because everyone's going to be stronger in some areas and in others. And we sort of think about like these different qualities of resilience as being like protective factors. So the more that you can have, and then if, for example, if like transitions are a little bit more difficult, then that's like an area that's maybe a little bit of more challenge naturally to her, but she's got all these other things that sort of like, so it's, you think about like a scale, you know, like you have more qualities of resilience, again, it kind of cruise through life a little bit easier. Okay, so Kat, you're going to do this, unique stressors.
Yep, so I'm going to go ahead and list some unique stressors specifically for kids with LGBTQ plus parents. And I encourage you to think of some things that might come up that you find as unique stressors if I don't mention them. So for instance, child may feel more disconnected or different, specifically othered, due to their identity or their parents' identity. Also, sometimes it can be sensitivity. There might be some sensitivity to being perceived as gay. Depending on the age category, a lot of times this can come up more so, like it can be a bullying piece of it sometimes, depending on how exposed other kids are in the community and in their schools and classrooms. Child being exposed to negative beliefs from the social media. So seeing social media and seeing kind of like slurs and language, kind of reiterating negative beliefs, which also then can be internalized, and they can internalize negative attitudes about themselves, their parents, and family and kind of friends. And it can kind of separate and cause that separation piece, which is
pretty big stressor when it comes to resiliency. And then also having a society with, cisnormative bias and, having a lot of cisnormative language, that puts a lot of pressure as well because it's not normalized. So it's not seen as normal. It's seen as, then again, other and different. So I guess that was one of the biggest pieces of being othered and different and kind of the society's way of viewing it, which brings us to the next few stressors.
So one thing I want to say is that these are kind of like unique stressors in the sense of that your kids have got all the regular stressors of like schools and, trying to get into college later and trying to make friends and playing with kids on the playground, all those things. And then they've just got like some unique stressors. So, and one of, there's a real biological and evolutionary basis to wanting to be part of groups, right? Like our society, has come along as part of groups, and that's a very protective factor. So I think that when kids feel othered at all, or if you even think about like your kids' books that you read them, you have to really go out of your way to find a book that's got like, two men as parents or two women or a trans person or a person even sometimes of color, depending on like where you're going to buy books. And so really thinking about how that impacts your child. And one example would be, my older son, for example, identify as a trans guy, and then his mom, who's my ex-wife, identifies as a lesbian. And so there has been many years of, even despite how many people that are not cis and not hetero in his life, how often I had to sort of draw to his attention that, hey, these things that you're saying or these things that your friends are saying are actually like unkind. And so it was really shocking to me as a parent to see how much he was taking in, and he was actually internalizing that despite the fact that his family is like, he's got a very LGBTQ family. So just being really aware of that like, your kids are going to take in more than you might think from, and really kind of like being proactive about talking about those things.
I think that also brings into kind of what ties into that, and having different resilience, different like things that you see in your child also caters to that need and individualizes the tools that is going to work for the individual child. And looking at the unique stressors and in combo what their attributes are and their strengths are, and even combo is what maybe their weaknesses are to maybe so we can boost their strengths. So then these are the kind of part two of the stressors is, minority stressors, world events, and peer pressures. So the politics and the way that the environment is can change in the schools. And can also change how one views their self and how one treats others and kind of questioning things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in particular, like politics, I've been very surprised at how much my son is aware sometimes of what's going on, or maybe what the, like, for example, before Trump was elected, I remember my son saying something to me about that Trump hates us, right? Yeah, at that time, he was only 5, I think 5.5. But my son's also of Mexican American heritage. And so that was very like salient at that time. But there were a variety of reasons. And at 5.5, I was very surprised at how he was taking in like what the dominant culture or the dominant message was at that time about who he was and like who his family was. So just being aware of that, I mean, and again, resiliency, like think about resiliency, I can't shelter my kid from everything. You can't shelter your kid from everything, but you can sort of foster their ability to kind of keep going and have a positive outlook. All right. So parent questions, what are some, like, as we talk about these unique stressors, we didn't want to belabor on them too long because we really want to get into like tools and how to build resilience. Are there things that come to mind that you're like, oh yeah, I can see my kid dealing with this. I can see, just any thoughts? Like,
I was just going to share real fast. Hi, this is Yari speaking. I need a break from staring at the camera. My eyes are blurry today, but I'm eagerly listening. So I'm planning to adopt, probably starting with trying to be a resource home as a foster parent and an adoptive parent to LGBTQ identifying teens. So as you talk, I'm just thinking about all the possible like other factors or other exposures they may have had, just, different communities,
sure.
how even all those transitions, different foster homes, removal,
Mm-hmm.
just add other intersectional stress too.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't wait to hear the tips on how to, help them grow more resilient.
Yeah, for
all of
sure.
that.
Anyone else?
I think just as the parent of a very young child, a very little toddler, seeing seeing people, seeing strangers just gender him based on what he's wearing. Even healthcare professionals who are like looking at his chart, misgendering him and just making assumptions. And also just the heteronormative just language that comes from like, oh, your mom and dad, and like, where's daddy today? Or, like,
Right.
what? Just
Right.
kind of assuming that we're a mom and dad family.
Yeah, totally. And even though I think it's really great for your kid to hear you just say like, oh, we're two moms, or however you might say it. And you sort of like, don't shy away from that. There's still this sort of message of like, oh, you're having to correct them, and instead of there being, and from the physician or the nurse, in just asking, oh, who's the other parent, or can you tell me about your other mom or dad, like instead of using more inclusive language. So that all those little things, I feel like they build up over time for your kid as just an additional stressor. Again, not something at all that thrive.
I'm still working on a way to respond to it without being triggered and being so reactive. I mean, even the doctor's office called to say, is this the mom or dad of Mavin? And I said, it's a 2-mom family.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I can see why it would be triggering or upsetting. I do think that like, we'll talk a little bit about like just modeling resilience and modeling sort of being able to, how you respond to things. I think is important for your kid. Like, if it really, really upsets you, it's going to signal to their brain that, oh, this isn't an upsetting thing. This is, as opposed to if you're just like, oh, hey, I'm mom and there's 2 moms, and like, just, kind of moving along, it actually won't register. It won't ping as much for your kid as like a stressful thing. Right. So it sounds like you would love to have that reaction and you're just like struggling with that. So not at all.
It's very helpful. It's very helpful to hear it, and I will take that in and work on that for sure.
It'll get easier, Kim, as you get more practice as somebody with 15-year-olds. And also any kind of medical doctor place always now sends out surveys, and I always fill them out and let them know how they did on this exact question.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
That's awesome. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so what builds resilience? We have a video here. Do you guys feel like you're going to have a bunch of questions at the end, or do you want to kind of go to the end and like, because this is like a 6-minute video, so I don't want to take up.
No, go ahead, play the video.
Okay, awesome.
Have you ever felt anxious when you've had loads of homework? Maybe you felt hurt when a friend said something mean about you. Or sad when your dog passed away. Or maybe you're feeling nervous about leaving primary school to go to secondary school. There are going to be times in your life that will be difficult to deal with. But there is good news. Did you know you can learn skills to help you deal with your challenging emotions better? These skills help you develop a characteristic called resilience. Resilience is the ability to cope with and bounce back from difficult times. It's being able to pick yourself back up after you've been knocked down. It's about building your inner strength to deal with and manage stressful situations. Resilience and emotions go hand in hand. Learning how to deal when they occur is important in developing your resilience. It can be helpful to think of emotions as the weather. Sometimes they can be stormy and dark, and other times they can be sunny and bright. Learning how to master your emotions can help you build the confidence to tackle any challenge thrown your way. Some of the challenges that you might be dealing with could include dealing with an illness, relationship or family issues, problems at school, bullying, or losing someone you love. Those are all really big things. But small things can stress people out too, like losing a sports game, being told off by a parent or teacher, or getting a detention. For some people, these little things can add up. But for other people, it doesn't bother them much at all. That's because everyone has a different level of resilience. Two people might experience similar situations, but cope with them in completely different ways. This can be due to past experiences, genetics, or what we have learned from parents. Everyone is different. The great thing is that you are actually able to develop and build your resilience. However, being resilient doesn't mean you are meant to push any feelings away or not express them. Developing resilience means you learn to recognize your emotions and manage them in a constructive way. Here are some simple ways to start developing your resilience. Find healthy ways to deal with stressful times. If things start feeling too stressful, find something enjoyable to do, like patting your pet, doing some exercise, or talking to a parent, sibling, or friend. It can also include speaking positively to yourself and reassuring yourself that things will be okay. Accept the fact that change is a part of life. This means everyone goes through it. Perhaps you have moved to a new city, or started a new school. Maybe there's a new member in your family. Often, it can take time to adjust to a new change in life, especially if we didn't choose it. But as you learn to accept changes in your life and make the best out of whatever is happening, you'll grow stronger and happier. Take some deep breaths. When you feel a challenging emotion, chances are your body is physically reacting to it too. It will most likely be giving you warning signs that you're feeling a certain way. If you're stressed, scared, or nervous, your heart might beat really fast, or you might feel sweaty and shaky. But did you know that you can actually use your body to help you manage your emotions? One way of doing this is by controlling your breathing. Start by slowing your breathing down. Take deep, deep breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. You'll be surprised with how calm this can make you feel. Finally, learn to be flexible when it comes to change. This helps to develop your resilience. Life isn't perfect, and things don't always go according to plan. Maybe you were promised a birthday party, but your family couldn't afford one this year. Or maybe you were expecting to get into the top team for your favourite sport, but found out that you placed in the second team instead. Can you learn to become flexible when things don't go the way you expected? Being flexible helps you to be creative in your ways of coping. Having a plan B and even a plan C, can assist in your flexibility so that when your plan A falls through, you still have other options. The key is to maintain a positive perspective and not only see what's not working, but be able to accept change and focus on moving forward. Developing your resilience is super important if you want to be able to handle difficult situations well and come out on top. Learning to develop your resilience can be done in many ways, like accepting that change is normal, using healthy strategies to manage challenging emotions, and learning how to go with the flow. Remember, being resilient does not mean you aren't allowed to feel and acknowledge your emotions.
Okay. All right. So there's a few things from this video that I want to kind of point out and talk about that I think are really important. One is that I think sometimes we forget how many, that resilience isn't really this like mystical thing that you either have or you don't have. Our bodies are responding to things that happen in our day-to-day lives. And also that how many like of these like little things that your kids are going throughout every single day. And on top of that, your kid's not really in control of many things. As adults, we're able to sort of like, oh, I really don't like this event that I'm at. I'm going to go ahead and get in my car and go. Your kid's at school all day. They're exposed to things that they might be uncomfortable for them, that they're not happy with, or kids that are difficult for them. So your kid is dealing with a lot of things that sometimes we, as adults, I feel like we are not always putting ourselves in our kids' shoes to kind of see everything that they're going through. It also talks a lot about how emotions are not the problem and how it's really about learning how to effectively deal with your emotions. So when you're having an emotion, your body is responding at the same time. And so you can either kind of deal with like your mind or your thoughts about it sometimes, or you can just work with your body, whether that's deep breathing, it can be petting an animal, it can be going for a walk, it can be taking a bath or a shower. There's so many ways that we can and that's still part, like teaching your kid to do those things when they're not feeling very good builds their resiliency. So that's part of building the quality of resiliency. But another thing I want to say is that they talk about, it's just like the parent example, the more you can model those things for your kids. So you have, you go to work and you have a bad day and you come home, and instead of, sitting on the couch or being in a bad mood or being really grumpy, you go, hey, dad's in a really bad place right now. I'm going to go take a shower and I'm going to go for a walk with the dog. Right. And, your kid might be able to come with you and be part of that. Or if not, you come back and you're like, I'm in a better place. Even without saying anything, you're not saying, oh, well, I'm building resilience or I'm doing self-care. But your kid learns from you how to handle like the stressors of life in a way that's healthy. So, all right. So one of the biggest things that builds resilience, part of resiliency, is just having connection. So think of all the different places your kid can be connected or can be disconnected. And I think being disconnected is just as noticing where your kid is disconnected is just as important as noticing where they are connected. So there's like parents, extended families, friends, their general community, and at school. But then also in particular, there's some research about kids whose parents identify as LGBTQ actually being connected to the community itself, which again, like normalizes who they are, normalizes their family, normalizes their life, or having other kids. I think that's one reason like GSAs are so important and things like that. So there's a study that was started it was a longitudinal study. This is particularly important. Started in 1955 by Dr. Warner. Dr. Warner was out of University of California. So they studied kids until they were 40 years old and kind of looked and saw what all of these kids had. A lot of stressors, a lot of like, whether that was divorce, poverty, domestic violence, different things like that. So all of these kids were kind of vulnerable, and they noticed that there was 1/3 of them that did much better than all the rest of the kids. So they didn't look at all the other kids as much. They wanted to really see what was going on with these kids that made them so invincible, despite they had good marriages and they had good careers and they were overall pretty well adjusted. So it's like, what is going on with these kids? So what they found was that those kids overall had they were well bonded early on, but overall they had at least one person in their life that they felt very supported by, that they were very connected to. And so that's what they found was the biggest difference. And so even if that kid, for example, lost that significant person in their life, they knew how to then find maybe a teacher, or they knew how to like continue that type of relationship. And that ended up being the number one most important thing. So just thinking about connectivity, and we're going to talk a little bit about that later, like how do you connect with your child? How do you make sure you're connected to them? Another thing is that, for an example, is Big Brothers Big Sisters that we all know, but they've done studies. I think it was in 2018 that they did a study of kids who, before and after they started having a big brother, big sister, and it found that those kids did better in 7 different important areas in life. Now, I didn't memorize what those were, but they were like school and behaviors, acting out. And there were different really important things that we think of as like important areas for kids. So again, that's like sort of hones in. It's another example. There's lots of examples of like how just having that one really important person who's like always by their side. That can be a parent. It could be, you know, an aunt or uncle, somebody who's like really they feel connected to. So another important thing is something called stay listening, and we're going to talk about that later. And it's basically just holding space for your child to offload their emotions. And by offloading, I mean letting them cry, letting them scream, letting them say bad words, just letting them like let it go and let it flow. So just also in that, refraining from jumping in and offering advice. When your kid is really like dysregulated, they're not going to be hearing your advice. They're not going to be like taking that in. So just doing a thing called stay listening. I'll talk a little bit more about that. Allowing their feelings, just remembering that kids don't have the cognitive skills yet that adults do. And I think it's something like until you're like 21 or 25, your prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed. So all the way through teenage years, all the way through early adulthood, your kid will still have like these really big emotions and not really know how to process them. So just letting them like offload them, thinking about just letting them go. You're like holding a container. So again, I talked a little bit about control, and like, if you think about your life throughout the day, how much control you have of your day, even if we kind of think, well, I have to go to work and blah, 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 you know, you can decide like how you get to work, or you can decide what you're going to eat. You can decide, well, if you're really sick, you're going to go home. You know, even our kids don't have that level of control. You can decide what you're going to wear. Sometimes our kids don't even get to decide that. So the more you can give your kid opportunities for control, and it can be as simple as, hey, we're paying at the grocery store and the kid wants to scan things. It takes more time for us, but just giving them places like, oh, they want to pay, they want to run the credit card, or they want to take the money, or wherever it is, or if your kid wants to wear something different than what you picked out for them and it's not your favorite thing, but you're like, okay, I can let them like have agency. So the more you can build agency in those small things, the more that actually translates out into the bigger things in life. So just communicating with them at their level. And sometimes that means like getting down on their physical level, looking them in the eyes. If they're like really needing some snuggles, but you're feeling like really rambunctious or restless, you kind of just try to get physically on their level too, and just connect with them. So just letting them know that they've been heard and asking open-ended questions of them. So this is all about just having open communication, which gets more challenging as your kid gets older, but it is really possible to stay connected to your kid, even though they will, as they get older, need more independence and more time alone in their own space and things like that. Refrain from talking when your kid's emotionally activated, just like, you know, letting them talk and not jumping in. I think that's one of the things we do have the hardest time with as parents, is talking too much, just like cutting our kids off. And we have so much we want to tell them and so much we want them to learn that we sort of like jump in and we cut off their emotional process. And we also jump in to offer solutions. So our kid doesn't, most of the time, surprisingly, it's kind of a shock. They don't actually need our solutions. And when we can kind of like constantly remind ourselves of that and offer them opportunities to problem solve, like say your kid gets home and they've been on the bus, and I mean, I know I tend to do this sometimes, you know, he comes in and he's like, blah, 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 blah happened. Oh, do you want me to call your teacher? Do you want me to email your teacher? Do you want me to talk, you know, do you want me to do this? Or maybe you should do this. And really the thing that my kid needs is just to hear him. And then after that, just say like, I wonder what you could do, you know, like what would make that better? You know, and sometimes it's as simple as, I'll deal with it. I'm fine. I feel like I get that a lot. But you know, I'm often surprised by what solutions my kid will come up with if I just give him the space first to offload his feelings, get into a more regulated space, and then just sort of offer to him like, hey, I believe in you. Like, I know you got this. Like, what do you think you can do? And he will have some he'll have some solutions on his own. So building resilience is also just about realizing that our kids will have challenges in life. And we can almost sort of encourage them to like take on those challenges, take on new things, expose them to new things. And when they want, sometimes I feel like, you know, we as parents often want to challenge our kids to do things, but then when they want to do a challenge, which might be jumping over a fence, or it might be climbing up on a thing that you're like, you know, or it could be, I really want to ride my bike to the park by myself. We get like, I don't know about that, you know, and we sort of like halt, but that's the growing edge that they're at. And the more we can go like, oh, okay, and maybe if I'm not comfortable, I could go, maybe you could just like ride your bike around the block instead, right? Or maybe you could climb like this other thing, or, you know, they're looking for a challenge. Kids actually naturally are really looking for challenges. So if you can kind of remind yourself to, as much as possible, let them take on those challenges that they're naturally coming to. One caveat I would just say is that even though it's great to expose our kids, it's also important to be tuned in and to know when we're pushing them too far or when we're not really hearing them. And I think that can be a really delicate balance between, well, my kid's telling me he doesn't want to do this, but I want to challenge him to take on this challenge. So sometimes it's just intuition and gut, like, maybe I just listen to my kid this time and just say, okay, we're not going to do that thing. You know, I find there's often a balance where I can say, hey, you know what? Well, just come along. I want to do this thing. I want to do the ropes course. I can tell that like it's too scary for you. So I go and I do it. And then if there's interest when, you know, my kid's there, then I haven't pushed him so hard that he's going to be like fighting against it. And I find that often there's some openness to maybe just trying a little bit of it once he gets there. So another thing is about mistakes. How do you deal with challenges? How do you deal with mistakes? If when you make a mistake, you're like, like really hard on yourself, really down on yourself, get really upset yourself, your kid's going to be learning that from you. So just thinking about that too, like really thinking about your own, just how you handle things.
Which exactly pulls me into the concrete for the building tools was finding a silver lining is something that, you know, I've seen parents kind of work on and finding their own silver lining, and then they reflect that and show their silver lining kind of with their child. So for instance, the fix it piece of it, am I fixing it? Am I trying to fix it? Am I being here with my child? Once you're kind of through that piece of it and you're with them, then it's a matter of, okay, that formulation of perspective and where is the silver lining? What am I going to learn from this? And what is that kind of resilient outcome or positive outcome, or even just outcome that is different? What's like a little kind of sliver of hope? So that's just kind of a helpful words to kind of remind is like, am I trying to fix it? And what's my silver lining is kind of what I used a lot when I was working in the schools. So just to be aware of what I was saying when I, you know, a teacher couldn't make it to the class when I had a whole classroom of kids. It's like, okay, well, we're going to have this person come in and teach, and it's going to be awesome because they're really flexible and they're super wonderful with colored chalk, you know, and kind of bringing in this really big positive while maybe they're not the subject matter teacher. So choosing what I'm saying as my silver lining in front of others as well. So I wanted to kind of give those as concrete tools. And then that kind of brings into special time, which I got to listen to the little blurb with Patty Whiffle with special time. I've also gotten to use special time on many different levels in my career. But I like the next slide that really breaks it down as to kind of what it is.
So I'll talk about special time. Special time is a really specific tool. It is one of the most powerful tools I think that you can do at home as a parent. And it's really sort of acts almost like its own version of parent-led play therapy. But outside of the box of play therapy, it really is a time that your kid gets your undivided attention. I think kids benefit from it the most, and you can start at 17 months old. I can tell you that, both of my kids are adopted. My older son was very anxious and was sort of like, I wouldn't say anxiously attached, but just came in with a lot of like hyperactivity and like fear and anxiety and stuff like that. And so I learned about special time and started doing it with him when he was around maybe a year and a half. And it radically changed his behavior and his emotional state. And I've used it with so many other parents. So I can tell you from personal experience and professional experience, it's really powerful. It does require doing it consistently over time. It doesn't have to be every day, but I think consistently doing it, every other day, at a certain time of day. It can be used particularly, like my kid, for example, it was always a screaming meltdown to get him to go to daycare or preschool, right? He just separating from him was so difficult. We started doing it every morning for like 10 or 15 minutes. I'd get up early and we would do it before we left for like daycare or preschool. And it radically changed how that went. And then later on in life, later on in 5 or 6 years old, he was really struggling with bedtime. So we started doing it instead right before bedtime. And we still, to this day, he will not. If I say, well, let's just do something else tonight, or let's not do special time, he's like, no, special time. He's almost 10. He's like highly committed to this. This is his time with his dad. So special time is just a lot of time, and you set the timer, and it's important that you name it. You can call it special time. You can call it daddy and me time. You can call it, if your kid's Marissa time. You can call it, whatever you want to call it, but just give it a name so that your kid knows to expect it. They know it's coming up. And you can use it also on the fly. So if you can tell that your kid didn't get a nap and you're going to be going into the mall and this is a little bit stressful, you can do it, for example, in the car. You can say, we're going to have 5 minutes of special time before we go in. Honestly, try it. It's kind of amazing. It works wonders with kids. And so what you do in that period of time, is you just do anything that your kid wants to do, right? And your kid will know there are certain things, and you can tell them well, if we're in the car and we're about to go into the mall, special time has to be within the car, right? That might be the parameters. You can set parameters. You always set the time. So you say special time right now is going to be 10 minutes, or it might be every evening. For example, I do 20 minutes of special time with my son before bed. He knows it's 20 minutes. Sometimes he wants it to be 40, and it's always 20, right? For me, that's kind of how I do it. You can also kind of go right now it's 5 minutes, and tomorrow night it could be 20. So you don't have to always have it be the exact same amount of time, but it is important to set a time. You actually physically set a timer, whether that's on your phone or for us, I say, Alexa, set a 20-minute timer. And then when it goes off, my son knows it's done. So you can also set some limits know that we're not doing special time on video games. We're not doing special time by watching a show. Those are some really good ones. It can also be, for this special time, whatever it is, and that we have to stay in the living room. Because say, for example, you got another child that's going to bed, and there's different things. So you set these certain limitations. Within that, your child gets to pretty much say what they want to do. And I can guarantee you, your child will want to do the thing that you don't want to do. They will want to wrestle when you're tired. They will want to, pull all the possum hands out of the, cabinets. They will want to do some kind of messy thing that you're just part of it really is them testing. Are you there with them? Are they actually in control? And this technique just really fills up your kid's emotional cup. So one of the most important things is that you do not look at your phone. You do not talk to somebody else. You do not clean the floor. You do not put books away while you're walking around playing. You're just focused on your kid. And a lot of people, kids in therapy parents will say to me, well, I do stuff with my kid all the time. We do something together every day, right? But usually we're also maybe dad or mom walks in, we talk with them. Maybe we do a little thing over here. Maybe we check an email, while we're doing whatever thing that we're doing. So if, for example, you are doing special time and your spouse or partner walks in and says, oh, hey, Joe, blah, blah, blah. All you have to say is special time. And it's just like a reminder, we're doing special time. Like this is like a no nonsense time that mom or dad is like looking and just paying attention to you. And I've seen it work wonders in so many different ways. So sometimes your kid will say, I don't know what to do. And you can just say, well, I'm just here with you. Like, I'm here with you. It's important that you don't pick the thing, that you let your kid decide, even if that takes like 5 minutes of them just kind of like, I don't know, you're just like, well, I'm just here with you. And you just stay focused on them and you don't jump in. Again, that's another example of you don't jump in and solve the problem for them. In that moment, their problem is, what do we do for special time? And it's like they're building that sense of like, I can do this. All right. So you have anything else to say about that, Kat?
I just really like the chat comments of that teenagers really do need it too. And I've seen wonders be changed with like some 17-year-olds that I was working with, and just the implementation of 15 minutes of special time once a week with their teenager, the behavior changes were like awesome. And I really like when you said one of the Stephanie, it's like putting money in the bank with your child, special time.
Yes. So. Yes, that's great.
And attention, deposit of attention that then pays off big.
Yeah. So I think this is such an important tool, and I think teens do need it. I think that one difference is like when my son was like 17 months old, I could say 5 minutes of special time and we would do like 5 minutes. I feel like teens need a little bit longer to kind of like settle in, let down their defenses. But I think really if you can start this in particular when they're young, they get so like my kid will come to me and say he wants special time when we're disconnected, when maybe I've been working on too many house projects. And that's a real win when your kid comes to you and requests something that they know is going to reconnect them to you. Right. So,
and that also, real quick, that's also a big thing with the timing and building trust with teenagers. If you're starting to do special time with teenagers, looking at the time frame that you are doing it and how long is that going to build trust. So if you are seeing and you're creating special time at, maybe you have a really kind of, I don't know, troublesome relationship at the moment, or it's, highly tense, and 5 minutes is the most that would feel comfortable. So maybe you work up 5 minutes at special time, just showing that you're there for those 5 minutes, shows consistency, and then building up and allowing the teen to even have some more control of, well, how long would you like special time to be? It's going to be consistent. I'm here for you. And kind of just reiterating that is where that change kind of takes place. So thanks for letting me speak.
And Stephanie, are you familiar with special time?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome.
We're big fans of the hand-in-hand parenting website and
awesome.
all of the things. We call it one mom, one boy time.
Amazing. That's awesome. Yeah. And so I haven't actually said that yet, but these two things, stay listening in particular, and special time, come from hand in hand. There's a really, really great book called Listen, written by Patty Whiffler. You can listen to it on audiobook. You can get the book itself. It's like a little bit of a thick book, but it is so wise. And I can just tell you that even though I felt I was a good parent when my son was young, it radically changed how I viewed my kid, how I viewed parenting. And people say to me all the time that my son is like so sweet and so kind and so, all these things. And I really think like those are all his natural qualities, right? But some of these tools that I've learned from hand in hand, I think have really allowed him to stay there instead of being a 10-year-old who's, getting a smart mouth, and although he has like a normal kind of smart mouth, but like starting to really close himself off and get disconnected, or be afraid of his emotions when he gets like dysregulated. So Patty Whiffler, for example, uses the term off track when we think of our kid as dysregulated. And I love that term because it's like, it doesn't make it clinical, and it's not like, it's like your kid has just gotten off track. So you can see your kid get off track in all kinds of different ways. They can, be whining. They can be acting obnoxious. My kid, for example, will get very hyper. He will get really hyper. He will just be in my face constantly. He's poking me, and I know he's like dysregulated in some way. He's not the kind of typical kid that might like slam a door, but he gets like off track, and I can see that. So you'll learn, what does that look like in your kid? And so you can so one important thing is sometimes in those moments, important to set like a limit around something, right? To say, you know, your kid is not, they're really whining, or say they're maybe like being obnoxious or not listening. And so sometimes we want to sort of placate them in that moment. But really what they might need is for us to say, nope, you can't have that, you know, second thing of ice cream, or, you know, it's 6 o'clock and you can't go to your friend's house because it's 6 o'clock and it's a school night. And instead of our just giving in to them to sort of like placate them or try to make them feel better, it's actually like you just set like a reasonable, kind limit, and you let them get upset, because really like they have a lot underneath that's causing them to be off track. So you just want to hold space for them. Think about just holding a container for those emotions, because our kids can feel, I mean, we can get overwhelmed by our emotions, but our kids definitely can get very overwhelmed by their emotions. And so you being that older, wiser person that is just holding space for them. And they might say things that are socially inappropriate. They might say things that are mean. They might say they want to punch their sibling. They might say they hate their other mom, that, you know, and just letting in that, thinking that is almost like a sacred space where you just let them let it out. Because we all have these thoughts and feelings, right? I hate my neighbor. I want to punch my neighbor. I mean, you know, whatever it is, even as adults, we can have these kinds of thoughts and feelings, but we're better able to kind of like, some of us better able to sort of just like modulate those and process them. So one of the most important things is your kids will naturally cry to offload their emotions. They're going to cry. So just giving them a lot of space and holding space for their emotions. It can sound not that hard, but it's actually, you know, it could be like 6 o'clock on Wednesday and suddenly your kid's off track and they're yelling, or they're throwing things, or they're screaming about how they hate their sibling. And you just are like, I can't handle this. But just take a break and like just hold space for them. And that will be powerful. It will be one of them. I know we're almost out of time, but stay listening. When your kid is really off track, they're feeling unsafe. So if you can hold space for them, they will, when that's done, they will not only be able to problem solve better, but they will feel connected to you, and they will feel like, you know, that you were there for them. And you're also teaching them how to be resilient in the face of having all these emotions. So that's pretty much what we have. There's a couple more things. I
can do this one real quick. The tools to build resilience. So as we talked about, implementing special time, the stay listening, and never underestimate modeling resiliency and self-compassion and one's own problem solving skills.
Yep. Helping them problem solve on their own.
Yep.
So do any of you have any questions for us about these things, about special time, about stay listening, about building resilience, anything?
I was just going to say, I really appreciate the website and the book. I'm going to order a copy and study up before I have those kiddos. And
oh yeah, awesome.
Just, you know, thinking as an adult, how rare, even with well-meaning family members or friends, like if I'm upset and need to just offload, how rare it is for them not to jump in after 30 seconds. Like, what's the bright side? It's like, no, I want to vet for 5 minutes, you know, and how amazing it is to offer that just listening space for your kids. So
yeah. And I mean, Hand in Hand also has like some parenting classes where you can kind of jump in and do some classes with them. I took one and really it like changed my life. So with my kid, and
one of our neighbors turned me on to Patty Whiffler and that whole thing when my kids were small, and it made a huge difference. I also say, like, one thing for me, especially when my kids were little, to think about their feelings is it's the same as pooping. Like they get a buildup of feelings and it needs to come out, and it's not always pretty to witness.
Right.
But, you know, especially for little kids, they need somebody else there when it happens. So,
oh my God, that's great.
Yeah. And it's like they feel better, right? Like,
and they feel better after. And then once I started thinking about that, it was like, oh, good, he's pooping. When really what he was doing was having a tantrum. But in my mind, like I knew it was building up, and I was just glad that it was getting the release that it needed.
Yes.
And that sort of reframing made a huge difference for me when I was, you know, parenting toddlers, especially.
Yeah. And you'll be surprised, like once a kid, if you just sufficiently let them get through all their emotions and really get it out, your kid will just turn and go like, you know, okay, I'm good. Let's like, they'll just like, they'll suddenly like have their own solution for a thing. You know, if they were like fighting with their twin or their sibling, they'll just suddenly go, oh, I don't care about that toy anymore. Like they just like, it's like all the emotion is kind of like dispelled, and really, you know, they're able to turn their focus to things that they do have, which might be like another toy or an opportunity to go to something tomorrow and they're not able to go today. You know, they're able to kind of just like, again, it's really that quality of bouncing back. This thing happened that I didn't like, that didn't feel good. And now I'm able to like resume my life, you know? So yeah, so we're out of time, but I'm happy to kind of like stay here and talk with you guys as well.